Hello, and welcome to I Am Not For Everyone, the podcast for those looking to release shame, heal from trauma, and feel really, really good being their fully expressed, authentic selves. My name's Dr. Lee, and I am a doctorally prepared nurse practitioner and a certified clinical trauma professional, as well as a mom, wife, and a human being navigating the world with complex PTSD. Season 1 of this podcast came about because I was tired of spending decades living in a shame-filled, trauma-laden body and brain. And after doing a lot of work and learning how to return to a safe, grounded place in my life, I knew it was time for me to take my experience in education and use my voice to unsilence myself, to release the leftover shame, and to give others permission to do the same. On Season 2 of this podcast, I'm going to be sharing my experience in education. But even more importantly, I'm going to be bringing on some incredible guests who are going to unsilence themselves. They're going to share their own stories of trauma, shame, and their journeys to healing, resiliency, and self-acceptance. While I believe these episodes will be deeply impactful, I do want to add a disclaimer that we're going to be talking about some potentially triggering topics. So please take the invitation to pause or skip or fast forward on any episode, and to treat yourself gracefully and kindly after each time that you listen. Let's dive in. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode. I'm so excited. I have this really gorgeous human sitting across from me in my Zoom screen, Eleanor Prisco. And Eleanor and I have actually worked together before in the past. She really helped me release a lot of my shame and some of my funky stories around money. And so I'm so delighted to have her here with us today to talk with y'all. So Eleanor, can you just give everyone a little taste of who you are and what you do, please?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Eleanor Prisco and I work as a money and mindset coach. And I specifically, shame so much. I'm already ready to jump in, right? But
go for it.
So what I do is I am bringing the feminized way of managing your finances and engaging with your money to the world of financial management, whether that be personal money, business money as an entrepreneur, and really leaning into how do we develop ease, pleasure, and empowerment when it comes to our finances, and going on reclamation journeys with women to transform their relationship with money so that they can receive more of it, so that they can have healthy money boundaries and experiences and really start to feel like the empowered money manager that I believe every single one of us are.
I love that word reclamation, right? We talk a lot on this podcast about how shame covers stuff up, right? Shame forces us to cut pieces and parts of ourselves off. And so like this reclamation piece it's a remembrance, right? It's this is how money felt good for me before I learned all of the things. And for some people, it's truly a reclamation of like being the person that they want to be now. Right. Mm-hmm. So such a beautiful thing. So I know you have your story of how you got into this work that really involves shame and money. So if you could share that with us, I'd be so thankful.
Yeah, absolutely. So my story of how I actually got into this work is a funny one. Just because I think it tends to be potentially the opposite of maybe what most people experience from my story. So, I grew up in a working class, kind of continuously struggling, kind of more of a working poor family where financial struggle was like always the situation. That built up a lot of resentment towards money and shame of not having money. And so I just decided to go into the deep end of figuring out financial management because I was just like, I'm going to figure this out. Where a lot of people kind of are just like, this is something I can never handle.
Yeah.
So that is like a little bit of a unique way in which I went towards it. However, when you decide to dive into the deep end of the financial management industry and how it's currently constructed, which is shame, self-guilting, doubt, like reincrimination of yourself for every single decision you ever made because you should have known better. And like, it's steeped in shame, right? The current financial industry and lots and lots of deprivation techniques, shaming yourself for wanting that coffee out. And then, oh my God, you decide to buy the coffee out, even worse, right?
Hashtag Dave Ramsey.
Right. So,
yes,
I was realizing that like, gosh, this all really doesn't feel good, right?
Yeah.
This doesn't feel pleasurable. And the silver lining of maybe not receiving a lot of financial education, right, from the traditional thing and having lots of boundaries set up, I just kind of was like, well, this doesn't feel good. And like the way that I was raised or what I experienced necessarily growing up didn't feel good. Like, I'm just going to create my own version. Like, there has to be something that is going to help me get by. And so that really led me to starting to just manage my own money, figure out these systems and structures, and massively self-educating myself around a lot of, financial things that a lot of people, especially as women, tend to veer away from because we've been closed off from the financial industry, like literally not allowed to have bank accounts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like at a time in like our history. And so, choosing to lean into this and go against, these ideas that I'm supposed to be shaming myself for everything I want. And instead being like, you know what, like, I'm just going to get the money to do what I want.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm just going to get the money. And so in doing so, right, and kind of living this lifestyle, my friends who were suffering from the shame industry of financial management were just like, how are you so chill about money? And how are you doing all these things? And I was like, well, I just got my own systems. And like, I have these like ways that I handle things. And so I started helping my friends get out of credit card debt. And then I was liking that more than my office job. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. I'm creating all this like deep empowerment with my friends, and like, they're getting what I'm saying. And so then I was just like, okay, how do I turn this into what it has now become today, which is, my feminine financial principles and like all of these strategies I developed and all these ways that I teach women, not only through strategy, but mindset on like leaning into the feminine financial ways, leaning into shedding the shame, leaning into, unconditional love and compassion, forgiving ourselves for things we didn't know. Cause really, I want like everyone who's listening to understand, like, shaming yourself for something you never were taught or never knew about money, like, that's not on you.
Yeah. Preach.
Like, that's not on you. Like, shed that, right? And if you're wanting to learn a different way, that's amazing. Follow that intuition, follow that instinct, right? And like, find the thing that's going to be most empowering to you, because like, just taking on the shame and guilt for like things you never knew or were never taught is like the way I think that the financial management industry keeps people locked into these deprivation ways, these really unsustainable like budgets and way of managing your money. And don't get me wrong, like, I'm about being intimate with your money and understanding where your money's going. But there's a big difference between, making yourself feel like crap because of how you're spending your money. And the funny thing is that it's your money. Like,
Right.
Yours. You get to just decide where it goes and what you do with it. And, anyways, I maybe went a little off topic.
No, are you kidding?
I have like how I got into it.
No, I have like 5 questions and I'm trying to figure out which one I want to ask first, like just reflections. I really appreciated your style of really coming at money from this anti-shame perspective, because, when we were going to work together, I was like, oh my gosh, I have debt over here and I have debt over here. And you were like, okay. And I was like, oh, wait, like, debt's not bad. And you were like, no, debt's not bad. And there's a few other really awesome people in your and my social spheres that also have taught like some messaging around that. It's been so, so helpful to hear, because as someone now who makes like tens of thousands of dollars a month, right, is getting like high into 5-figure months, like getting close to 6-figure months, there was a lot of shame for me personally around having more than enough, right? Which is almost the opposite of where you came from, right? the more than enough. So like everything always had to be spent down. So if I had debt, it was like, okay, we need to like get everything to zero balance sum, right? So like we can't have savings and we can't have this, and we can't have that because the debt has to go away because we have to be at zero. Yeah. And it was just like this really exhausting game I was playing. And now I'm like, oh, this is just kind of like how I roll is I use a credit card for a while and then it gets up and the balance gets higher and then I pay it off. And then I also have money in savings. And I'm also investing money over here and I'm also donating money. And like, when I just like took the shame off of it, I actually started managing the money so much better because I wasn't like telling myself stories about if I was good or I was bad or I was wrong or I was right for what I was doing. And I just leaned into like what worked best for me. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more of your take on the debt piece, because we were chatting about this right before we hit record. And I think that this is something that so many people feel shame around, myself, my former self included, is debt. Like, and the ramifications that go along with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like debt has been a huge part of my own financial journey as well. Like I want to make it very clear. I'm a very transparent individual, right? I myself have had debt. I am still working to pay off aspects of my debt. And I really want people to know like that you're not alone with your debt, right? There was a time where I didn't carry debt. And a huge part of my own like shame reclamation journey, right, was this fact that I had made large investments in myself and my business and going into debt for those investments. And, you know, the shame that comes through with those of like, you've made the wrong financial choice, right? And then carrying that pressure around, right? Carrying that burden around of like, oh, I've made this financial mistake. And like, and we frame it that way in our mind because of how the financial management industry today frames debt.
Yes.
So like, number one, I just want to say, right? So the way the current financial management industry frames debt is singular. There's debt. It's like one big thing. All debt goes into the same space.
Yeah.
However, that is not true. There are different types of debt which you can carry. There can be positive debt. There can be negative debt. And I'm not even talking about the traditional sense of like buying a house and that becoming an asset later on, right? A good debt could also be you investing in a program that's going to better yourself for allow you to make more money or like increase your capacity to hold space for your clients or learning a new skill, just as we all took on most of the time, lots of debt to go to college, right? Yeah. To get these degrees that were going to better us professionally. Right. And so I think it's really important for us to understand that we have different emotional responses to different types of debt. Right. And so a lot of times what the industry tells us is number one, all debt is the same and it's all bad. All debt is bad. And if you're buying on credit or you're taking on debt, you're doing it the wrong way. You should just have this cash in the bank to be able to achieve this. Right. And when you really look at the big players in the financial industry, they're taking on debt. Right. Like you look at some of the biggest financial players, like I'm not saying that they're taking on like irresponsible debt, right? And that's a whole other word that can be really triggering and shaming to people about like being responsible, financially responsible, fiscally responsible. And I want to invite folks that like, if they find that triggering in this moment to reflect on like, wait a minute, what is triggering about being responsible? Because is Eleanor saying the same type of responsibility that I'm thinking in my head? Or is she talking about actually aligned investing and like fully betting on yourself and getting behind yourself and doing investments that are going to make you feel good and pleasurable about your financial kingdom?
Yeah.
Right. Because there's all these words, like, especially I know, gosh, oh my gosh, there's just so much, Lee. Oh,
I know.
I guess I start then going like, oh my gosh, then there's management of money.
Oh my gosh. Yes. There's management, there's investing, like there's donating, there's spending, there's saving. There's all of these words that have ties.
Yeah, exactly. So I just want to say, like, when it comes to debt, the very first thing I want to invite anyone into is understanding that you have different types of debt, and to lump it all together like the current financial industry tells you to do is one of the things that's going to cause you the greatest level of shame, the greatest level of avoidance, the greatest level of disempowerment, honestly, right?
Yeah.
Because we're going to look at this money as this huge financial mistake, like all of it, and lump it all together. But when we actually break it up and like are able to like look at it and see like, oh, let me look at the spending I did here. How do I feel about that spending? Did I actually really love that course that I invested in? Did I really love that like I was able to take time off from work because I was totally burnt out and live off of credit cards? I know it was hard to do, but like, did that allow you actual capacity to like refill your cup back up? Like, did you really enjoy that vacation? Like, I understand that sometimes you look at these things and folks would be like, oh my gosh, how is this financial person advising me to go blow it all on a credit card?
So irresponsible. Yes.
Right. But like, the thing is, if you're able to meet yourself with unconditional love and compassion around your money, then like, you're going to be able to bring that to yourself and be able to like stand in a whole new way behind who you are and the choices you are making.
Yeah.
And this is also one of the things that leads us to always be an indecision, right? We can spin out an indecision because we're judging ourselves for every single financial choice we've made in the past.
One of the things that there were two examples that really fundamentally changed how I thought about debt. And one was, I had a friend hold up I had a friend ask me, they were like, pull out your wallet. I was like, okay. They were like, hold up a credit card and hold up a debit card. And I was like, okay. So I pulled out a credit card and I pulled out a debit card. And they were like, I can't tell the difference between those. Like, they both have 16 numbers on them. They both have the 3-digit code. They both have a bank name. Like, whenever you go to spend money somewhere, no one can tell the difference between those, right? It's either this is money that I've deposited into the bank and I'm trusting the bank to hold on to, or this is money that the bank has loaned me and is trusting me to use. But either way, it's based in trust. And so like, I get to trust myself with deciding which one I'm using and how. And that was so freaking helpful. And I was like, oh, like nobody, like the grocery cashier, the checkout person like isn't judging me if I'm using like my Chase Visa versus my like bank card. Right. So that was really helpful. And then the second thing was they were talking about, you know, return on investment, right? Which is kind of what I heard you play to a little bit. They were like, if you have a credit card that's got like a 15% interest rate, and you spend 10 grand on a coaching program, right? And you keep that debt on that card that entire year and you only pay the minimum payments. They're like, you pay $1,500 in debt or in extra, like in interest, right? If you learn how to sign one high ticket client, if you learn how to create a coaching program that gets 10 people in at $1,000, so like, is it worth that extra $1,500 to learn the thing that you just learned? And that's what's been so helpful for me from an investment perspective is like, if I take out this loan or if I use this credit card or if I, you know, don't pay for this in full and end up choosing a little bit higher monthly rate, like, is that worth it from a return on investment standpoint? And isn't helpful to my nervous system to be able to spread that out? Because if so, then it might not even be a financial return on investment. It might be an emotional or a mental return on investment of, okay, I know that right now I can't afford this whole thing. But if I apply the principles I'm learning here, if I keep working the way that I am, like I trust myself to make more money. And that's been something that's been so hugely helpful around the trust, the self-trust piece, because I think that is something that happens with the shaming around money. The financial industry teaches us not to trust ourselves, right?
Absolutely.
They make it really hard for you to understand your financial reports. Like every time I get my stock reports, I'm like, I don't know what this says. Like, I don't know what's going on here. And I have to email my person and ask the questions, right? So there's a lot of confusion around your reports and how things are done so that you do feel like you can't trust yourself. And then there's a lot of just like societal expectations on those of us who feel more comfortable spending money or feel more comfortable like, oh, I'll make more and just spend more. There can be a lot of shame around that. And so it gets to a point where you're taught, hey, you can't trust yourself to show up with money in a good way. And so this is what you need to do, or this is who you need to listen to. And you're right. It's very disempowering.
Absolutely. And I'm so happy you touched upon the self-trust thing, because this is something that happens, I think, with every aspect of the financial industry. So that when I say that, I mean, I'm talking about spending, I'm talking about saving, I'm talking about investing, I'm talking about debt, I'm talking about income, like every single aspect. We're repeatedly trained to be like, do not trust yourself. And the reason why, like, you're not trusting yourself is probably, right, because you have dedicated yourself to this financial way, right? You're going to get on a budget. And like, the problem is that this budget is built on an unstable foundation. That unstable foundation includes things like deprivation techniques, right? Yep. So cut out every single thing that's excess. All of those things that make your life potentially easier or more pleasurable or make you feel good or make you feel supported. That is something extra, and you should feel bad about wanting it, about needing it. So cut it out, right? So like deprivation, number one technique to just like eliminate everything. Then on top of that, it's like, oh, and now let's go ahead and take a look at the financial choices you made and where you should be. Right?
Where you should be.
Where you
Holy
should
cow.
be.
That is, as a 35-year-old human with 3 kids, and they're like, this is where you should be for college. And this is where you should be with retirement. And I'm like, you know what? And based on who? Based on what?
I know. And the thing is, that creates such inflexibility, right? Yeah. And so it's like, it's based on what and based on who, and like, are you actually taking into consideration that over the past 2 years, I've doubled my business, and that all of those years that like, maybe I wasn't making the financial choices I should make, that I couldn't make that up in a couple years. Like, and I'm not promoting this as like, this is the box that fits everyone. I think that one of the most important things as well, right, of this, like, what the current financial industry says is, and then here's the box that you're supposed to fit into.
Yeah.
And if you don't fit into it, something's wrong with you. So we have inflexibility, we have deprivation, and then we have, you're not fitting into the box. And then your entire budget and your entire way of engaging with your money is built upon these principles. And then you maybe stick with this for a month, maybe 2, hell, maybe you even make it 6 months. And then you come to that 6 months, you're completely burnt out, you're exhausted, and you're so frustrated. You feel so out of control, even though you've been massively attempting to control, right? And so then you decide, fuck this. I'm spending the money. I'm going on the vacation. I'm having the shopping spree. I'm doing the thing. And then you decide to do this. You decide to spend the money however, right, you want to. And then you come down from that, like that high of trying to grasp control, and you hit the shame spiral.
Yep.
Right. You go into like, oh my gosh, I've done it again. Look at how broken I am. I can't meet these expectations. They're so simplistic. There's something inherently wrong with me.
There's something wrong with me, which is the shame piece. It's not even guilt, which is I've done something bad. It's there's something wrong with me.
There's something wrong with me.
This reminds me of, and I'm going to put a little trigger warning here from a disordered eating standpoint. This reminds me of binging and purging.
Absolutely. It's 100% that.
It's such a byproduct of a very puritanical, patriarchal system that says, this is how it is. And like, in order to get what you want later, you must deprive yourself now.
Absolutely.
And it's so unfortunate because, as a human who now lives by like, some of my affirmations are like, massages make me money, right? Like napping makes me money. Being lazy makes me money. But having been in that very shame-focused place before around money, of like just always trying to make myself smaller and make myself more, again, fit in that box. Mm-hmm. And you're right. Like the box doesn't feel good. The only thing that feels good about it is that you are trying to fit in and be accepted. And so if we can actually find the self-trust and the self-compassion and the self-acceptance outside of the box, then it's like the box isn't even necessary.
Exactly.
And then you just get to do the really fun work of having a lot of people question you and think that you're weird. And, you know, like I've had people get really mad before when I'm like, that's not bad. Like I've had people get very upset and I'm like, okay, so like, why does it bother you that much that I'm sitting here saying that debt's not a bad thing? If it's taken on in an aligned, conscious way. And it's because this really does butt up against a lot of the puritanical, like morals and values that are instilled in us from a very young age.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what is something like if somebody's listening to this and you've just blown their minds, we've blown their minds around the fact that they don't have to, like, not everyone needs a budget, you know, not everyone needs to cut up their credit cards or stick them in the freezer. Yeah. Not everybody needs 6 months of expenses in a rainy day fund, right? Like, what would you say to that person who's hearing this and maybe going like, wait, what? What are some of the first steps that someone can take to kind of like release or heal from this?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple beautiful question and there's a couple different directions to head in, right? Because like when we're realizing this, I think one of the biggest things that can help someone as they decide to create a new relationship with their money and one that is based in empowerment is actually just start observing what comes up for you when you decide that you want to spend money, right? So the thing is, or because what's going to happen most of the time, right, is that we either start running to the past and pull in our past financial choices and telling us, well, see, look what you've done in the past. You definitely can't spend now. And then, or they're running to the future and it's kind of like, no, I need to hold on to this money because of what could come. Like the other shoe is going to drop. And so like, it's being observant of that. And if you're running to the past, my invitation is to listen very closely to what I'm going to say and hear that what if every single financial choice you have made has been right? What if every single financial choice has provided you information which has helped to inform you into becoming the person you are today and to continue to inform the evolutions of the person you will become?
Holy cow.
Like, what if we were all right?
Yeah. Wow. I just got chills. Like, rewind that 30 seconds, y'all, and hear that again. Cause that is such a beautiful, have you ever heard the saying that like depression lives in the past and anxiety lives in the future? Right. Yeah. So people who have a tendency to feel more depressed, like, well, I can't fix it because of X, Y, and Z in the past. Like, I think giving yourself that evidence of like, actually, this was right. Because like, first of all, now I know a couple things that I'm never going to do again. Right. Like those did not feel good and I'm never going to do those things again. And I have an idea of like what led to those things. And secondly, I think it's just such for lack of a better word, like a mind fuck of like, what if all those times that people were telling me I was doing something wrong, I was just doing something that felt wrong to them and it was actually right for me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So if we think about it, if we're somebody who goes to the past and thinks about it like that's such a beautiful reframe. What about if we're somebody who goes more to the future and like worries about stuff?
Yeah. So, and I want to quickly just run back to the past of what this specifically helps. In that, like, when we are able to reframe and make ourselves right, I want you to understand that when we choose to trust that thread, we're able to actually create an ability to tune in and make more aligned choices around our money now.
Mm-hmm.
Because then instead of like hearing all this past or this forward thinking, it's just kind of like, okay, wait a minute. I can pause and take a breath and think like, is this an aligned choice for me right now? So that's a very important understanding of like literally what that reframe and what that shift provides.
Yeah, like I'm hearing you actually you stop gaslighting yourself a little bit, right? Like you stop every time you think of something, you're like, well, that has to be wrong because every time I've tried to make a choice in the past, it's been wrong. Like you get rid of the evidence that's required for you to keep self-gaslighting.
Exactly. So I wanted to just like, that's a very important connector.
So good. I'm so glad you said that.
Now the thing is when we run ahead to the future and are like feeling anxious about like what this could do, we're actually going to go back to the same thing almost, because the thing is a lot of times when we run ahead to anxiety, our mind has some type of evidence that says that could happen.
Yeah.
Right. So this is a lot of times going to be most likely back in our childhood experience, right? It's going to be when we were very like young humans, really absorbing and like pulling information from around us when we kind of run into that anxious state of before, or again, informative years of your financial experience when you had your first job, got your first credit card, you had potentially a very like traumatic experience, which is like holding very tightly to your nervous system and being like, no, 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 no. This is a very anxious thing that you're about to do.
Yeah.
So again, it's an invitation back into that space of excavating, doing a little gentle excavation with ourselves of understanding like, okay, what, like, I want us to boil this down to like a really simplistic example. So like, let's say you're out shopping and you see like a shirt that you really like, and you're like, I can't spend this $25 on this shirt. Like, what if I need this money for groceries? What if this, and we're talking about like $20, right? Like, what if I need it for groceries? What if some bill comes? What if some unexpected shoe drops? What if something happens with my car? What if, like, there's all these like what ifs, right? And so we want to like pull back and be like, okay, what is bubbling up here that is allowing me to distrust that I can say yes to myself, or say yes to my desires, or say yes to my pleasure in this moment, right? Because there's something from that experience, and then it's going back to that experience and being able again, right, to ask ourselves, what information did that provide me? And even when it's coming from a traumatic financial background myself, right? Like this can be hard because like we look at those experiences now as adults and we're like, there's nothing good from that, Eleanor, like nothing lives there that's good. And I want to invite you into seeing like, it's potentially given you a very good example of what you don't want.
Yeah.
And that it may not have been the best experience. And it has provided you information to inform you of what you do want now.
Yeah.
And that's very hard. And I deeply understand how hard that work is. But if you can at least hold on to that one point of like, it has provided me information of how I don't want it to be. Right. So like, for instance, if you experienced instability financially growing up, you could be like, oh, that's giving me information. I don't like instability. Right.
Yeah.
So I like stability. So what does stability mean to me? What does it look like to me? And so when we're able to see that, and then it's easier for us to actually be like, oh, okay, every single financial experience I've had, again, has helped inform me on my journey now. And so when it comes to buying this top, it really comes down to, well, what are the feelings driving wanting to buy the top, right? Am I feeling a little bit out of control and dysregulated, and I'm trying to grasp for control? And when we're choosing to spend our money, that is obviously a clear example of me in control. Like, it's my money, I'm choosing to control it, right? Or is this like, actually, I've been feeling really frumpy in all my clothes, and I really want something new, and I want to get rid of some of the things in my closet, and is there something else going on there? But like learning how to lean into trust means that we have to trust the past, right?
Oof.
Like that the past was all right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, oof is the word, right? That hits
Yeah.
you right in the chest.
Yeah. That's hard. Like, I want to be very clear, being like on like a shame podcast, like trusting that the past, not as evidence that it was all right or good, but just trusting the past and that it formed and shaped us and informed us, and that there are areas where we can claim empowerment from.
Yeah.
Is the really big step there.
This is bringing to the surface for me, you know, the difference between survival and thriving, right? And a lot of us continue to self-shame around money and around finances and our spending and our debt because that was how we survived, right? In our family structures. So if you learned instability as a child, like if there wasn't enough money for food, or your utilities got turned off at points, or your mother and father or your caregivers consistently argued, like you trusting money or you creating certainty around money was how you were able to survive, right? And so once we get to a point of actual survival, and I should say, once we get to a point where we have the capability for survival, because a lot of us, when we learn these survival tactics, they can involve cycles of self-sabotage where we actually take ourselves to a not enough place, where we take ourselves to a point where we're like, I'm not surviving here. Like I can't survive here. And so it's nuanced, right? But when we get to the point that we have that ability to self-trust, like no matter what happens, I trust myself that I can find enough food for my family, that I can make sure that my rent is paid, that I can do these things. Like no matter what, I will figure it out. You know, setting aside the conversation of marginalization and just inequality and all of those things to the side, just for this purpose alone. When you get to that point, it's really empowering because you're like, okay, I am at the point now where no matter what happens, I trust that I can handle it. So first of all, I feel safe enough to do the self-reflection around, do I actually want the shirt, or am I feeling dysregulated because I had a fight with my mother 20 minutes ago and she was telling me I was being irresponsible. And so I'm like, fine, I'll show her. Right. Or is it like, I really want the shirt because like you just said, like, this is, I've never seen this shirt before. It's got my favorite band on it and it's a limited edition. And like, this is what I want. Right.
Yeah.
That the ability to reflect in that moment, and then also the ability to then act in aligned action and act out of self-trust. Like, this is the thing. It's not just around money, right? It's around food. It's around our intimate relationships. It's around our parenting. It's around our sexuality. Like it's around everything, but it all comes back down to, am I willing to stop shaming myself and cutting myself off from what I want, or acting in ways that really like don't feel good and right for me? Am I willing to stop doing that and actually make the choice of self-compassion and self-trust and like, I don't have to make myself wrong for things. I don't have to punish myself for things.
Yeah. The re-incrimination cycle.
Yes. Like I don't have to participate in this anymore because I'm actually recognizing that I want to thrive and this doesn't help me thrive.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's like one of the biggest things that can be transformative in our relationship with money, is when we start to see like, oh, wait a minute. These cycles of shame and deprivation and re-incrimination aren't helping me thrive.
Yeah.
Like they're instead causing me to feel huge amounts of disempowerment. They're causing me to not be able to have conversations with my partner.
Yeah.
Right. They're causing me to snap at my kids.
Yeah. Or hide things.
Or hide things from our kids. Right. And like, instead of creating something that you potentially never have experienced. So like kind of going back to what we were speaking about in the very beginning about this, not only being a reclamation experience for yourself, but potentially generationally. I think understanding that context, especially if you've come from an experience where money was very taboo, it was never talked about, right? Very hush hush. Whether money was perceived as good or bad, you had it or you didn't, right? That can be, tabooing money can happen on both ends of that spectrum.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's really about not only a reclamation journey for yourself, but potentially what you want to create for the generations to come after yourself, right?
Yeah.
And like creating healthy, intimate relationships with our money, and like allowing our children to experience that empowerment, and allowing, finances not to be the thing that it like kind of takes out your relationships. And it's a big one. Money is a thing that goes underground. And a lot of times we don't realize how underground it goes in our lives.
Well, we did a shame series earlier on in the podcast that are from my lives on Facebook, in our Facebook group, Becoming Trauma Informed. And we had one on money, and we had one on money, body image, food, and sex. Because I said, these are the 4 things that we cannot get away from. These are the 4 things that are literally involved in, that are required for us in, first world societies to, we can't get away from them.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to shame around these things, you're right. Like thinking about the opposite of the shame here, shame is disempowering. Shame is cutting pieces and parts of yourself off in order to try to fit in. Right. And absolutely. So if we can find our power again and recognize like, oh, you know what? The part of me that loves Gucci handbags, like she doesn't have to be cut off anymore. Right.
Yeah.
The part of me that actually, this was one for me. I started getting, manicures, gel manicures twice a month, because I had stopped biting my nails, and I had always avoided being on video because with my hands, I'd always hid my hands because I'm like, oh, it's gross. Like my nails are awful. And there was a lot of shame around that. And so one of the things when I like really was like, I'm empowered to stop doing this, and I stopped, I'm like, by me doing this, I'm willing to actually get out there and show more of myself and be on camera more and do more lives. And so like, there are a lot of people out there that are like, that is frivolous to do when you still have debt, or you still have this, or you still have that. And that was such an empowered choice. And it seems so small and trivial, but like it made a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because from a business perspective, it's like, I'm able to show up more fully expressed because this is here. And so thinking about like the places in your life where you don't let yourself spend money, because you're like, oh, I have to have X amount in the bank first, or I have to do this, or I have to do that. Like, I would rather make $1 million and have 50% of that money go to business expenses than make $200,000 and have 30% of that money go to business expenses.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. And I want to like pick up on something very important that you shared there. Right. So you were talking about like, oh my gosh, I'm getting my nails done and I still have debt, right? That like what, maybe $40 a month, maybe $60 a month, right? Would have been so critical, right? To paying down your debt, that extra $60 a month. However, this is where sustainability, which is like one of the feminine financial principles that I teach, comes into play. So like, choosing to be like, oh my gosh, I need to like walk this tightrope of perfection, right? And like deprive myself of everything that makes me feel good. And that's going to help me get to my goal, this like goal, whatever the goal is. It's like, but like, are you going to sustainably get there? And if you're not choosing a sustainable strategy of getting there, are you ever going to get there?
Yeah.
Because for instance, especially if we take on the example of debt, to get like a little bit into like strategy here, right? Like if like how much are you resisting looking at your debt because you know how unpleasurable the repayment process is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But it's because you're buying into the deprivation techniques. It's because you're buying into a lack of flexibility, right? Flexibility and adaptability is another feminine financial principle I teach, because like we need to understand that month to month, you are a human and your life changes.
Yeah.
So choosing to have this budget that is inflexible and rigid, right? And following these deprivation techniques that doesn't take into consideration like you getting thrown off your horse because back to school happened and you need to buy clothes for the kids,
Mm-hmm.
or winter's here and your kids have moved up a size, or the holidays have come around, or your anniversary has come around, or a birthday has come around. Like all of these things, like when we take in rigid ways of being with our finances, which is what the current financial industry promotes, we don't understand adaptability or flexibility, like understanding month to month things change. And so when it comes to looking at achieving any type of financial goal, whether that be debt repayment or increasing your savings, increasing retirement, whatever it might be, the reason why we avoid it so much is because it is going to be a steeped in shame process. And it's just going to be so unpleasurable. We know it because we're told we need to cut out getting your nails done.
Mm-hmm.
Like what a frivolous, bad thing to do. But it's like, however, if me getting my nails done makes me feel so good, makes me show up more for my business, makes me show up in a different way at work, makes me excited to, go out and network, makes me excited to do all of these things, which is in turn going to increase your income, which would transform your like progress towards your financial goal. Wouldn't that $60 a month be worth it?
Right.
Like,
and I know. And like, you hear that and it's just such a no-brainer. And yet, like, that's just not how we're taught things. Like,
exactly.
I remember when I first started working with you, I was doing profit first. And so that is, you pay yourself 50%, your operating costs for your business are around 30, taxes around 15, and then you have 5% for the profit account.
Yeah.
And I remember like looking at my business expenses and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, okay, but mine really kind of hang around 50, right?
Yeah.
But that's what feels good to be really, really supported in my business right now. And if I were to cut any of that out, that would add an extra 10 hours of work a week to my life, or that would add me having to do something that I really didn't want to do. And so instead it was like, okay, well, what if we keep that 50% instead of like profit first tells you to like cut all of that out, right? Get it down to 30 no matter what.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, what if we keep it at 50, but like, we then start making more money and let that grow. Right. And then, so that's actually been kind of the process that I've used is like, as the monthly income gets higher, we take the business expenses back up to 50% and invest in what we need. And then it grows more and that gets closer down to 30. And it's actually the exact opposite of what they've said to do. But I really believe in like getting myself the support I need before I make the jump, rather than like doing it all myself and then having to bring somebody else in and be like, okay, now I'm drowning and I need you to like take this off my plate.
Right. And I need to somehow frazzily train you into whatever system.
Yes. And so I think that, just really leaning into what works best for me, does it feel better to make more money and have 50% of my income go to self-care and to bills and to all the things than cut myself off from all of those things and make less potentially? Yeah. And there's no right answer. Answer. And my business expenses or self-care expenses or monthly bills are going to look different than yours are. And like, that's the beautiful part about it is I could look at your feminine financial planner and be like, this looks awful, right? Like, I hate this. Yeah. And that's fine because it's not mine, it's yours.
Exactly. And that goes back, I think, to one of the, like, a key principle of like understanding that like, you don't need to fit into some box.
No.
The key in becoming empowered with your finances is making yourself right right? So like saying all the things are right. And then like choosing to be like, okay, what is going to be sustainable for me? How can I incorporate like adaptability and flexibility within this? But like, what is going to be sustainable for me? Because I've worked with so many different female entrepreneurs, right? And some of them have had literally 10% overhead up to like 50, 60% overhead. It's different for each business. That doesn't make any of those businesses good or bad. It's simply like understanding what your business model is, what's the level of support, and also understanding, right? Like you're a mom, you have kids, like being like, hey, do I need to like learn this and do this thing and, you know, dedicate 10 hours a week to it when like my time is already like so precious and so tight and I've got a lot going on versus, oh, I can hire someone to do that and it will mean this change. But like me bringing another person into this group program or bringing another one-on-one client or launching this other, like that could all balance out and be worth it. I think that that's like such a big thing to speak to as well, of understanding that like, we don't need to always have it all like figured out and like have all the money sitting and waiting there to be spent, right? Like sometimes we can take that risk of investing and like getting the support we need so that it creates spaciousness for us to receive more.
Yes. Like one of the things I learned with you, for myself personally was, you know, I get these big pay in fulls sometimes where it'll be like 10K, 20K, 30K, pay in fulls. And before it was like, okay, I need to spend that money away immediately. Like I need to pay down the debt. I need to like do all these things. When I remember the last pay in full we got, I was like, okay, so we're going to like put 5 months of our bills over here. And then we're going to like take a vacation with some, and then we're going to tithe 10% of it. And then we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And it was like such a different experience. Like when money comes in now, it's just like, oh, this amount goes over here and this amount goes over here and this amount goes over here. And it's not a stressful decision-making choice or decision-making process anymore because it took the time to like look at it from an aligned perspective and practice. Like you don't have to throw all your money at the debt. You're allowed to keep like one of the big things that I think for a lot of people who've grown up like me, where more than enough is a feels scary or it feels, it makes you feel like you're a bad person because other people don't have enough. And so there's a lot of humility and religious stuff tied up in the more than enough thing that we don't have time to go into. But one of the most helpful things for me was just practicing leaving the money in my bank account, in our bank account for like a week and just staring at it. And what I'll say too is like, even going through this process and removing so much shame, as you get to new levels, it still comes back. It happened to me the other day where I was looking at my husband and I was like, oh my gosh, like we don't have any money. And he was like, hold on a second. And he like pulled up the bank app and we're looking at it and he's like, for real? We don't have any money. And I was like, but it's all allocated for things. And he's like, and we can change how we allocate that if we need to. Right. And I was like, thank you for coaching me, sir. I appreciate that. But just, I want to say that too, is like, you're going to go through cycles, right? This stuff has been deeply ingrained in your brain for a very long time. And society's still going to keep trying to program you back into it. So like, if you notice yourself going to the past or going to the future, like also don't make yourself wrong for that. If you're like, oh my gosh, I'm back here again.
Yeah. It's totally normal. like beyond, right? Because really what's happening is like, when it comes to our money, a lot of times, like the beliefs that we have are ones that we end up dealing with again and again. It's just, we become more apt at like dealing with them in a faster way, right? We're able to catch ourselves faster. We're able to move through it faster. We're able to turn to our tools and things like that. And that's what is really important. And I think you brought up such a good exercise, right? To understand about how shame comes up, maybe like a little later on, once we start to have money, because our brain can do a really beautiful, entertaining thing where it kind of puts money on this pedestal. And they're like, well, once I have the money, the shame's going to be gone. It's all going to be easy. It's going to be so much better. Like, it's
I wish.
like, it's just like, you know, like maybe I'm not doing well managing my money now, but once I have the money, it's all just going to get like bippity boppity boo, we're all good. But that's not true. Right. And so like you brought up such a beautiful point of like, then receiving these large sums of money and being like, oh my gosh, I need to offload it. Right.
Yeah.
Like I need to offload it. And that is like, and shame is driving it.
Oh yeah.
It's like, you need to offload it to the debt. You just received all this money. There's no way you could put it in savings to create greater security. There's no way you could just be like, hey, all household bills are paid for the next 5 months.
Yeah.
We're good. It's sitting here. Like we're fine. Like putting some towards debt. Right. And that again goes back to these really key principles of understanding sustainability and adaptability, right? Mm-hmm. Of like bringing that into the way that we approach our money. And again, like taking a minute, taking a deep breath, right?
Emotionally regulating, y'all. 10-second right. protocol. Go listen to the podcast.
Right? Like take a minute, take a deep breath and be like, interesting. I'm observing that I immediately want to offload this money, that it doesn't feel comfortable or safe to have. Where's that coming from? Like, and being able to be in a position, where you're able to come from that neutral space because you've maybe done the work to heal some of those aspects. But like, even if you maybe haven't done that work, asking yourself, like, is this sustainable for me to offload this money? Is it going to make my nervous system feel safe?
In like long term, like, and then now it might make you feel less activated. It might make you feel more regulated, but like tomorrow or a week or a month from now, are you going to be like, no, I'm not, this does not feel good.
Or just thinking like, if I put just $500, $1,000 into a savings account that then just sat there and was there. Yeah. Like would that make me feel better from just having this money rather than being like, okay, now it's time for me to like offload it all.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, like the layers are continuous with our money. And it's, it's simply about like learning how to navigate them in a more empowered way as we move through them. Right. And again, always turning back to that unconditional love and compassion for ourselves for like, however we show up, whether we're activated or not. It's not about turning to like self-judgment. It's about being like, this is okay. I'm allowed to experience these feelings. They're a truth for me in the moment. They may not be a truth with a capital T, which means like a true truth.
Yeah.
The truth.
They're
like,
just
they're
my
truth for me right now in my nervous system, and it's real. So I think that that's like one of the most important things that I always talk with all my clients about is like always coming back to that unconditional love and compassion. And can we get ourselves to a space of like, well, I'm right now, and I can meet myself with that when it comes to anything going on financially.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I feel like I could chat with you for another 5 hours. We won't do that.
I know.
No, don't worry about it. But
we'll have like an extended cut get posted somewhere.
So I just want to wrap up with like, can you let everyone know where you are on the interwebs, where they can find more like juicy goodness teaching from you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow me on like all the socials, just at Eleanor Prisco. So like Instagram and Facebook and all that good stuff. And then enrollment is currently open for Money School, which is like my all-time favorite program, literally just about like how to adopt the feminine financial principles when it comes to your personal financial management and have the mindset to back it up. Right. Like I don't ever teach just strategy or mindset. It's always a combo with me.
Yeah.
So that's a really amazing opportunity if you're wanting to start to, heal your relationship with money and learn a whole new way of being. And if you're ever interested in like chatting about one-on-one opportunities, just reach out to me on the socials and we can set up a chat. And I'd love to, get to know you and see if we're a perfect fit to do all this delicious money work together.
Yes. Hire her, y'all. Just hire her. Just do it. I promise you it's worth it. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. There's so much goodness in here for our listeners, and we will see you all next week. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in learning more about how you can help yourself and others release shame, heal from trauma, and create healthier, safer, more mutually beneficial relationships, I want to invite you to head to our website, institutefortrauma.com. At institutefortrauma.com, you'll find free resources, be able to connect to our free online community, and view our courses and trainings, including our foundational trauma-informed, psychologically safe certification, aka the TRIP certification. Head to institutefortrauma.com today to learn more.